Hello everyone, today I'm going to read Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, Chapter 1, Part 2. Last time it was about that Mr. Dursley saw weird things on the streets, and now he's talking to Mrs. Dursley. I suppose so, said Mrs. Dursley stiffly. What's his name again? Howard, isn't it? Harry. Nasty common name, if you ask me. Oh, yes, said Mr. Dursley, his heart sinking horribly. Yes, I quite agree. He didn't say another word on the subject as they went upstairs to bed. While Mrs. Dursley was in the bathroom, Mr. Dursley crept to the bedroom window and peered down into the front garden. The cat was still there. It was staring down Privet Drive as though it was waiting for something. Was he imagining things? Could all this have anything to do with the Potters? If it did, if it got out of that they were related to a pair of, well, he didn't think he could bear it. The Dursleys got into bed. Mrs. Dursley fell asleep quickly, but Mr. Dursley lay awake, turning it all over in his mind. His last comforting thought before he fell asleep was that even if the Potters were involved, there was no reason for them to come near him and Mrs. Dursley. The Potters knew very well what Petunia and he thought about them and their kind. He couldn't see how he and Petunia could get mixed up in anything that might be going on. He yawned and turned over. It couldn't affect him. How very wrong he was. Mr. Dursley might have been drifting into an uneasy sleep, but the cat on the wall outside was showing no sign of sleepiness. It was sitting as still as a statue, its eyes fixed unblinkingly on the far corner of Privet Drive. It didn't so much quiver when the car door slammed in the next street, nor when two owls swooped overhead. In fact, it was nearly midnight before the cat moved at all. A man appeared on the corner that the cat had been watching. Appeared so suddenly and silently you could have thought he just popped out from the ground. The cat still twitched and its eyes narrowed. Nothing like this man had ever been seen in Privet Drive. He was tall, thin, and very old, judging by the silver of his hair, beard, which was both long enough to tuck inside his belt. He was wearing long robes, a purple cloak which swept the ground, and high-heeled buckled boots. His blue eyes were light, bright, and sparkling behind half-moon spectacles, and his nose was very long and crooked, as though it had been broken at least twice. This man's name was Albus Dumbledore. Albus Dumbledore didn't seem to realize he had just arrived in a street where everything from his name to his boots were unwelcome. He was busy rummaging in his cloaks looking for something, but he did seem to realize he was being watched because he looked up suddenly at the cat, which was still staring at him from the other end of the street. For some reason, the sight of the cat seemed to amuse him. He checked and muttered, "I should have known." He had found what he was looking for in the inside of its pocket. It seemed to be a silver cigarette lighter. He flicked it open, held it up in the air, and clicked it. The nearest street lamp went out with a little pop. He clicked it again. The next flickered into the darkness. 12 times he clicked the put-outer, until the only lights left in the whole street were two tiny pinpricks in the distance, which were the eyes of the cat watching him. If anyone looked out of their window now, even beady eyes, Mrs. Dursley wouldn't be able to see anything that was happening down on the pavement. Dumbledore slipped the put-outer back inside his cloak and set off down the street towards number 4, where he sat down on the wall next to the cat. He didn't look at it, but after a moment he spoke to it. "Fancy seeing you here, Professor McGonagall." He turned to smile at the tabby cat, but it had gone. Instead, he was smiling at a rather suave-looking woman who was wearing square glasses exactly the shape of the markings on the cat had had around its eyes. She, too, was wearing a cloak, an emerald one. Her black hair was drawn into a tight bun. She looked distantly ruffled. "How do you notice me?" she asked. "My dear Professor, I've never seen a cat sit so stiffly." "You'd be stiff if you would be sitting on a brick wall all day," said Professor McGonagall. "All day? When you could have been celebrating?" I must have passed a dozen feasts and parties on my way here. Professor McGonagall sniffed angrily. Oh yes, everyone is celebrating. All right, she said impatiently. Do you think they'd be a bit more careful? But no, even muggles have noticed something's going on. It was on their news. She jerked her head back at the Dursleys' dark living room window. I heard it. Flocks of owls, shooting stars. Well, they're not completely stupid. They were bound to notice something. Shooting stars down in Kent. I bet that was Delegas Diggle. He never had much sense. You can't blame them, said Dumbledore gently. We've had precise little to celebrate for 11 years. I know that, said Professor McGonagall irritably, but that's no reason to lose our heads. People are being downright careless out on the streets in broad daylight, not even dressed in muggle clothes, swapping rumours. She threw a sharp sideway glance at Dumbledore here, as though hoping he was going to tell her something, but he didn't, so she went on. A fine thing if it would be on the very day you-know-who seems to have disappeared at last, the Muggles found out about us all. I suppose he really has gone, Dumbledore? It certainly seems so, said Dumbledore. We have much to be thankful for. Would you care for a sherbet lemon? A what? A sherbet lemon. They're a kind of muggle sweet I'm rather fond of. No, thank you, said Professor McGonagall coldly, as though she didn't think it was the time for sherbet lemons. As I say, even if you-know-who has gone, my dear Professor, surely a sensible person like yourself could call him by his name. All this you-know-who nonsense for 11 years I've been trying to persuade people to call him by his proper name, Voldemort. Professor McGonagall flinched, but Dumbledore, who was unsticking 2 sherbet lemons, seemed not to notice. It gets so confusing if we keep saying you-know-who. I have never seen any reason to be frightened of saying Voldemort's name. If I know you haven't, said Professor McGonagall, sounding half exasperated, half admiring. But you're different. Everyone knows you're the only one who you-know. Oh, all right. Voldemort was frightened of. You flatter me, said Dumbledore calmly. Voldemort had powers I've never had, only because you were too, noble to use them. It's lucky it's dark. I haven't blushed since Madame Pomfrey told me she liked my new earmuffs. Professor McGonagall shot a sharp look at Dumbledore and said, The owls are nothing to the rumours that they are flying around. You know what everyone's saying about why he's disappeared? What finally stopped him? It seemed that Professor McGonagall had reached the point she was most anxious to discuss. The real reason she had been waiting on a cold, hard wall all day, for neither as a cat nor as a woman had she fixed Dumbledore with such a piercing stare as she did now. It was plain, whatever everyone was saying, she was not going to believe it until Dumbledore told her it was true. Dumbledore, however, was choosing another sherbet lemon and did not answer. What they're saying, she pressed on, is that last night Voldemort turned up in Godric's Hollow. He went to find the Potters. The rumor is that Lily and James Potter are dead. Dumbledore bowed his head. Professor McGonagall gasped. Lily and James? I can't believe it. I didn't want to believe it. Oh, Albus. Dumbledore reached out and patted her on the shoulder. I know, he said heavily. Professor McGonagall's voice trembled as she went on. That's not all. They're saying that he tried to kill the Potter's son Harry. But he couldn't. He couldn't kill the little boy. No one knows why or how. But they're saying that when he couldn't kill Harry Potter, Voldemort's power somehow broke. That's why he's gone. Dumbledore nodded gloomily. It's true, flattered Professor McGonagall. After all he's done, all the people he's killed, he couldn't kill a little boy? It's just astounding. All of the things to stop him, but how in the name of heaven did Harry survive? We can only guess, said Dumbledore. We may have never known. Professor McGonagall put out a lace handkerchief and dabbed at her eyes beneath her spectacles. Dumbledore gave a great sniff as he took out a golden watch from his pocket and examined it. It was a very odd watch. It had 12 hands but no numbers. Instead, little planets were moving around the hedge. It must have made sense to Dumbledore, though, because he put it back in his pocket and said, Hagrid's slate. I suppose he was going to told you I'll be here? By the way, yes, said Professor McGonagall. And I don't suppose you're going to tell me why you're here, of all places? I've come to bring Harry to his aunt and uncle. They're the only family he has now. You can't mean the people who live here, cried Professor McGonagall, jumping to her feet and pointing at number 4. Dumbledore, you can't. I've been watching them all day. You can't find 2 people who are less like us. And they've got this son. I saw him kicking his mother all the way up to the street, screaming for streets. Harry Potter, come and live here. It's the best place for him, said Dumbledore firmly. His aunt and uncle will be able to explain everything to him when he's older. I've written them a letter. A letter? Repeated Professor McGonagall faintly, sitting back down on the wall. Really, Dumbledore, you think you can explain all this in a letter? These people will never understand him. He'll be famous, a legend. I wouldn't be surprised if today was known as Harry Potter Day in future. There will be books written about Harry. Every child in our world will know his name. Exactly, said Dumbledore, looking very seriously over the top of his half-moon glasses. It would be enough to turn any boy's head. Famous before he can't walk and talk. Famous for something he wouldn't even remember. You can't see how much better off he'll be growing up away from that until he's ready to take it. Professor McGonagall opened her mouth, changed her mind, and swallowed, and then said, Yes, you're right. Of course. But how is the boy getting here, Dumbledore? She eyed his cloak and suddenly thought she thought he might have been hiding Harry underneath it. Thank you for watching this video. I'll continue page 15, part 3 of chapter 1 later. Please subscribe to our video. Thank you for watching. Bye!